It's minutes before your alarm goes off, and suddenly you're in high school, and you're racing for that class, and you're confused, and you're wondering, class, what class? You look down at your agenda, and it's a class that you haven't even registered for, and there's an exam. You know, this doesn't make any sense. You've got 3 kids in the other room. What's going on? Your heart starts pounding, and then your alarm goes off, and you're, whew, so relieved. Has anyone in this room ever had a slight variation of that nightmare? No one wants to feel unprepared, no one. And that is why we're here today, to help you feel prepared. So, assessing the room, I don't know if some of you are connected to a public company, some of you may be curious about this or thinking that this might be a different subject. And some of you may have, you know, nothing more fun to do at Caesars than to come and listen to us. But we're going to make you happy that you came. I'm just going to do a quick couple of introductions before we start discussing our topic at hand. First, I know that this room is going to be able to give it up for Deal Flow and this amazing team. These guys have all been terrific. Every single person that I've worked with has been fantastic, and especially Charlie Napolitano. Thank you so much for doing a stellar job. Let's clap it up for Charlie. The man of the hour, or I should say the third of an hour, or a little bit less at this point, Brian Haugli is a cybersecurity expert by all accounts. He spent most of his career with the Department of Defense creating systems. He is the creator of, I'm going to get this correct, and I'm going to pronounce it the preferred way, CISO Life, which is a cybersecurity risk assessment platform. And is that, no, it's actually, yeah, it's CISO Life. And he's also, you can correct me, it's also the host of a YouTube podcast. Not to mention adjunct professor, and also is the CEO of SideChannel, which I encourage all of you to take a look at their 10K because it's really the gold standard for what we're going to be discussing. For those of you who don't know me, lots of people at this conference I've known for a very long time. I am Andrea Cataneo. I'm a partner with Mitchell Silberberg and Knupp, MSK, on the capital markets team. And for the past, I don't know, 25 years, I've probably worked on 200 capital markets transactions. I'm also the co-executive producer of Heart of Influence, which is a Zoom networking platform to help people in various professions get to meet each other and potentially to do deals. And I co-host a podcast with Frank Ferrara called Off-Road. It's an offshoot of Corporate Roadshow. Finally, I sit on the board proudly of the National Investment Banking Association, and we are here. We've got a great relationship with Deal Flow, and come and see us. We've got a table. So, without further ado, I have some questions for Brian, but what I encourage all of you to do, because this is going to be a high-level discussion really about cybersecurity disclosure requirements, not only for those public companies that need to file a 10K soon or 20F, but for incidents, we're going to talk a bit about that. There are a lot of details we might not cover. We're going to try to leave a few minutes at the end for questions, but our QR codes are going to be displayed for you, and I encourage you to hover over them now so that you have our information, because the later conversation might end up being more valuable for you to speak with me about a variety of things, everything I've described, but really to Brian, because this is someone who I think you're going to learn a lot from. So, Brian, I think I'll sit down now.
Thanks, Andrea. So just real quick. So Brian Haugli, I'm the CEO of SideChannel. We are a publicly traded company. We focus on cybersecurity products and services. My background is in over 10 years in the Defense Department and the intelligence community. My capstone role was running the Pentagon cyber program during Obama's second administration. I went on to become the Chief Information Security Officer for a Fortune 500 insurance company and built that up globally, and then launched SideChannel in 2018 and been building out ever since. I wrote the book on the U.S.'s National Cybersecurity Standard by NIST, the NIST CSF, published by Wiley. It's a college textbook. If any of your kids are taking cyber, they're unfortunately reading that book. I'm sorry. I'm also, the host of CISO Life. It's a podcasts and videocasts talking about cybersecurity and all things. I am that nerd that likes controls and frameworks and making compliance an easy thing, because I don't like trying to figure out if I look good in orange, and I'm pretty sure nobody else does either. So, this is the thing I've spent my entire life on, having been recruited out of high school to be a ethical hacker, and then going into the US Army and kind of going that track. I am that guy. I don't know, this is my thing, this is my jam. Just like law is yours,
Yeah.
cyber's mine, so.
Law and connecting, but definitely this is the man to speak with about any of these topics. And I think, some of the things we'd like to talk about initially will be why this rule was put into effect back in July of 2023, and the two components that you may or may not know a little bit about, if we're talking about, what needs to be disclosed in terms of just your policy, showing that you have one. There's a format that you need to follow. It's not just, let me, just jot something down. And then with respect to incidents that happen, could we talk a little bit about, because I know you followed the rule, we discussed some of the things that didn't make it into the follow rule. One thing surprising is you don't need someone on the board who actually is an expert, but let's speak to that a little bit first.
Yeah, so the SEC took a lot actually from New York State Department of Financial Services when they wrote Part 500. And what that goal was to set a standard of cybersecurity for financial institutions, insurance institutions, domiciled and doing work through New York State. SEC, through its evaluations or its exams and waves, was like, all right, New York State's doing it right. We like that. They've built a structure. They've got fines. They're able to hold people accountable. We're pushing for transparency amongst these companies doing work within our purview. So SEC said, okay, we're going to do something. They had a proposed rule. Some of the regs that they proposed got a tremendous amount of pushback. The biggest one Andrea just mentioned, which was boards should have a cyber expert on it. There are a lot of people that wanted to see that happen. I thankfully agree with the SEC in not having it in the final rule. I don't think board members should be mandated to have a cyber expert. They should be able to get advisors, outside advisors. They should be able to have a direct line to a chief information security officer. But there's no mandate to have that. There's a good structure already. But really, like what they came out with in July and then went into effect in September was any company, there's two major components to the SEC rule. A lot of people focus on the first, which is there's a 4-day disclosure period if you have a material breach. Now, there's a lot of talk out in the industry right now around what is material. Well, do not look at your cyber experts to figure that out. Look at your CFO. Look at your company, look at your business leaders. Let the cyber experts inform the CFO and the business leaders on what materiality is for your business. But everyone focuses on this 4-day disclosure. So unless you have a national security concern that you can justify to an attorney general, you have 4 days to disclose to the public in an 8K what that material incident was to your company. That's where everyone seems to focus. The reality is, in the new regulation under 1.05, that's one component. The majority of what the SEC is looking for is underneath what's known item 106. There's actually 12 capabilities that the SEC is expecting companies to start disclosing and being very transparent on. Our stock symbol is SDCH. We were the first company to publish in a 10K to meet this new requirement. Go on there, look at our 10K, go under item 1C, where forever everyone has always said not applicable. We wrote it. We've already gotten the feedback from folks that it is now looking at a pretty good standardized way of addressing how to kind of put these together. Why? Because there are multiple components. There's 12 components. The SEC is looking for these basic things. What is your risk management strategy? What is your risk management decision making? What does your governance look like? On the top down, what does that kind of entail? At a governance standpoint, who on your board, what committee, what group, who has oversight on cybersecurity? Is it traditionally with the audit committees where it has been? Great. Is it another committee? Great. Is it the full board? Even better. That's one. And what does that look like? What purview do they have? Do they have a direct line to the CIO or the CISO on the topic or not? If you are, and I won't tell you what Fortune 500 I worked for, but you can look it up. If you're in a position as a chief information security officer asking to be discussing cyber risk to the board, and you have your CEO, CFO, and chief administrative officer in line telling you to tone it down, Brian, dilute your message to the board, is that actually transparent? Is the board fully informed about what the risk is? No. The SEC is trying to stop that because it is happening. So you've got governance at the top. And then coming down from that, you've got, well, what's your actual risk management program look like? And when you look at the requirements, what the SEC is looking for you to do is, I believe, beautiful. They didn't mandate you do anything.
Yeah.
You could write the disclosure statement, we have no cybersecurity processes in place.
But you have to at least do that.
You have to at least do
You've
that.
got to address it.
Nobody wants to write that statement. You can no longer just say not applicable. You have to declare if you have something or not. So because no one wants to be able to write that statement, you have to write something. You have to point to something in your environment that says, yes, we have a monitoring capability. We have a CISO. We have somebody at the helm. We have a program. We have policies and process. People are actually thinking about this as a risk. And you're doing something about it. Not just we have a policy, it's written, it's on the shelf. You actually have to have something that you can say, we look at. So think about being audit ready. You know, when you're like, oh, we have a policy, or we have that written, and it's sitting on the shelf, and the last review date was 3 years ago, what do you think the auditor is going to do? Right? The SEC is trying to take the same approach. You're going to have to start disclosing this on a consistent basis in your 10Ks and your filings. What do you look like? So what does that program look like? And the SEC didn't say, build these things exactly. They just said, disclose them, which is forcing companies to now sit there and figure out, how do we disclose them? So because the filings and the requirements are any company with a fiscal year that ends after December 18th, 2023, has to have this in their 10K on a go forward, we've now only seen 5 companies publish their 10K with this because they've done it within the time frame. I think majority we're going to start seeing kind of by mid-March, which is the requirement. Ours, Lockheed's, First Mortgage, and then two other companies. So people are starting to figure this out, and even from the SEC legal community and the auditing community, no one really knows how to write these yet because no one.
And you've gotten some compliments. I want you to mention that it's not just someone with, 25 years of experience helping companies do their, put their annual reports together and be compliant. You've gotten compliments on your disclosure many times. And what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, walk us through your process, because this wasn't something that you just came up with haphazardly, 30 days prior. You developed it over time, and your interaction with your auditors and so on, because it's worth, people need to start thinking. I think public companies would benefit so much from seeing that it is a process that they need to employ.
Yeah, at the heart of what the SEC is trying to do with the regulation is forcing the transparency. But the transparency is for the shareholders, the investors. Companies need to start talking about what their actual cyber posture looks like so the average investor can then read it and understand. Well, figuring that, and I taught this in the military, like always write to an 8th grade reading level, and that's okay, because I'm comfortable with an 8th grade reading level. You have to write your 10Ks in the same way. So first and foremost, headers. Like walk the people who are reading this through the story. So the SEC is looking for 12 things. Guess what? I've got about 12 headers, and then the section explaining what that is. It seems simple, but a lot of folks who are, and I'm connected with a lot of CISOs and chief risk officers across the US that are asking, like, well, how do we structure this? How do we talk about it? And you look at what the SEC is asking for in their regulation, and you write it in that order. Why? Because I think for 2 things. One, the average investor is going to sit there and look at it and go, okay, you're walking me through the story. I understand what you're doing from top down. Governance, management, process, people, and policies, kind of all the way through. And then if the SEC ever comes a knocking, or anybody else, you can walk them exactly through. Hey, here's what your regulation says. You were looking for this, and then, well, here it is. You're looking for that, and well, here it is.
It's
boom,
really
boom, boom.
it's the recipe, and you can't just look at the SideChannel disclosures and say, oh, I can cut and paste a lot of this. It's very much about your own facts and circumstances. It's got to be something that you take the time and go through. And some of you may be thinking, well, what if I don't? What if my disclosure is inefficient? It doesn't comply? What's really going to happen to me? What's the outcome going to be? And, just thinking from, a legal perspective and just in terms of what the SEC is all about. It's all about transparency and protection to the public. If you don't have a policy, not good. If you do have a policy, you're not disclosing it properly, or it's not a complete policy and you're not reporting incidences. Shareholders and investors can legitimately be damaged measurably. So we're talking about potential shareholder lawsuits. And with respect to how the, how enforcement is going to work at the SEC, anyone who has public company experience has seen reactions by enforcement in ways that we can't always predict. But why tempt fate? There can be fines associated with this, especially if there are damages to shareholders, and potentially even if there are not damages to shareholders, just as a preventative measure, because breaches can be significant. So what I'd like you to touch upon, I know we don't have that many, we have a little more than 4 minutes left, but what constitutes materiality? What's a breach that you can think of that has impacted so many shareholders and people? Because we've all read about a few things that have happened, but something even smaller might be impactful.
Yeah,
so over to you.
The SEC, the way they're looking at it is beyond policy too. I want people to kind of remember that. This is not going to be, I wrote the document and we're good. They are looking for a program. And a program is just like how your CFO has accounting and controls separation and people in place to execute on what's being required. Cyber is now in that realm, right? It has moved and shifted out of being an IT risk, and it is now an enterprise risk at an operational level. And it needs to be considered as such, and that's why it's being forced to be discussed at the board. That's why more boards are asking about it. So what the SEC, I think, is going to start doing around an enforcement standpoint is they're going to make a real name right out of the gate. The first couple groups that get popped in any way, sorry,
That's okay.
Rolling back to my operational days, but the first couple companies that get breached and have a true material incident and haven't disclosed in their 10Ks a robust cyber program that made shareholders confident in what that cyber program could or should have done, the SEC is going to come after them with fines. And they're going to make an example, because that's exactly what New York State did, and the folks at SEC are very tied in with what DFS is doing. They aligned on the same cybersecurity framework, the NIST CSF. They aligned on the exact same types of controls, the structure, hell, even some of the same people are involved. So they're taking a cue from this is how it's going to be done. And New York State took 2 years of enforcement watching companies lie about, oh, we have MFA in place. The audit came in, no multi-factor authentication. That's why you got impacted and breached. That became a $5 million bad day for a company under DFS, and a small company at that. So the disclosure components tied to enforcement are going to be just right there. I go back and forth on shareholders' view of breaches, and here's why. I can point to Target. Target got popped back in the early 2010s. 1 year later, the share price was back to where it was the day it got breached. People forget, and that's normal. That's human nature. But if that happens a number of times, eventually you'll get a degradation of trust. If it happens once, people kind of realize that companies can bounce back. But I think it's going to be more impactful fines, sanctions, things like that versus shareholder trust, or even the ability to list or continue as a public company in some structure. I think the SEC is going to put more pressure around that than I think shareholders are. Because look, I think it's 4/5 of Americans have had their identity stolen. How many of us have the pile?
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was that high.
Yeah, oh, it's insane. How many of us have the pile of free credit monitoring from our banks, whatever? I've got enough for me through when I retire and my kid. We're good. People are just numb to it. So I think there's an unfortunate reality that's happening on the shareholder side. What we're really going to see, I think, and this is me going back to the days at the Pentagon where I can't tell you about the stuff I did, except we used to track companies that predominantly, or foreign actors that predominantly spoke Russian and Chinese. I can't tell you what countries they were, but these guys have military or financial motives, plain and simple, right? And they're all motivated by different things. There's a phone company that doesn't exist anymore because they had all their intellectual property stolen by a foreign adversary. That can happen. Yeah, that's a bad day. Is that every instance? No. But do you want that one time to be you? So for me, putting these things in place, what the SEC is looking for, it's not rocket science. It's not a lot of lift. You already got the enterprise risk management in place. Now that it's basically law of the land, you got to do it anyway, unless you want to just roll the dice. So if you're looking to IPO, if you are already on the OTC, or if you're on NYSE or NASDAQ, you need to see is there anybody at the helm for cybersecurity in your organization? If the answer is, and I've been in this room over here and talked to people, oh, we got a guy for that. If that's your answer, I shake my head. I'm like, you actually don't have anything. If you don't know by name who your CISO is, your program is inefficient. If your board's not asking about or already seeing reports on this, you don't have a program. You need to start thinking about who's going to start articulating the narrative and shepherding that through to the decision makers and the oversight and the governance of your organization. And you need to start thinking about who's going to run it operationally within your organization, both pre-breach and post-breach.
Absolutely, and we are,
Yeah, we're out of time.
you know, getting low. Actually, it looks like we have a few seconds left. Maybe they gave us a bonus 30 seconds. If you've got further questions, we didn't have time for Q&A. Take a look, take a picture of our QR codes. Brian also serves as an advisor to companies who need a little guidance in this area. Highly recommended. I couldn't be more pleased and happy to assist if you've got questions really on anything that I brought up. And even if you'd like to come on my show, please connect with us. We hope to speak with you further, and thank you. Thank you for your time and your presence.
Yeah, if anybody, you can follow through that. I'm pretty big on LinkedIn. It's a lot easier to get to me through that. So connect with me on there. Andrea and I will definitely be hanging out in the back. If anybody just wants to talk one-on-one on this topic, happy to, and we'll be here through tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah.
So thanks again.
Take care.